experience with Middle-earth. I was probably in 1st or 2nd grade, and at night my dad would read to my sister and I. All of us would get in my bed, or we'd all get in her bed, and he would read The Hobbit, which was a treat because he wasn't often home in time because he worked real late. And so we were always really excited to find out what happened as the story went along. After we finished The Hobbit, I started reading The Lord of the Rings myself. You know, reading at school between classes, and up through high school I would read all 3 books once a year at least. And I remember being sad every time I would finish The Return of the King. Just really breaking my heart that I had to leave this world. I distinctly remember one time reading it really late, at 2 or 3 a.m. And this was probably when I was in grade school, and I was falling asleep, and I was kind of in that interstitial space between being awake and being asleep, and I remember being really confused if it was real or not. So maybe I've just been confused in this world for a long time.
Yeah, good job. That's your book, huh?
Yeah.
You gonna read it?
When we decided that I would stay home with Callum, I think I had probably talked about that way before we ever decided to have a kid.
I think you were looking for a way to maybe not have to work full time.
Yeah, yeah. I've never been somebody who gets a lot out of working.
Not to say that he's not a hard worker, he's a very hard worker, but
Yeah.
the idea of having a boss, maybe.
I grew up in a house, my dad didn't like his job. That was one thing that we talked about a lot, was liking your job, finding something that you at least didn't hate. I used to own Atlas Improv here in town, which is a comedy improv company. Just can't make any money doing it in Madison. I could have stayed on running Atlas as a job. I would have.
Or be a professional host.
Yeah, I'm a good host. Everybody form 2 lines.
I knew who Brendan was my junior year in college. The night that we actually got to know each other, it was a senior appreciation night, so I was hanging out with some friends, and so we went to this bar, which was a townie bar that my friends would never have gone to before, but it turns out it was the bar that Brendan was at all the time. And Brendan just asked me if we wanted to get a drink with him, and not too long after that we were dancing and having fun. I didn't know if I was ever going to hang out with him anymore after that, but the next night he knocked on the door, and I didn't really feel like talking to him, and so my roommate answered the door.
You were in your pajamas.
Yeah, I think I was just laying on the couch, and I was just like, just get the door, tell him I'm not here, or sleeping or something. And he was like, give this to Sarah. And it was a CD that had one of the songs that we had been dancing to that night. And then pretty soon after that, we started hanging out. But I had actually never been in a long-term relationship before and wasn't really used to anyone taking up any of my time. So Brendan was extremely patient with this, and I would be like, all right, we'll hang out from 5 until 6 this evening, and then I have all these other things I have to do. And he just kept going along with that, and pretty soon I think we really did start to like each other. And after the Christmas break, I got a big bouquet of flowers from him, and I think we really missed each other when we weren't together, spending that hour of structured time together every day.
I didn't interact with it a lot in college, but then when I came away to grad school, like one of my professors from undergrad, who was a philosophy professor of mine, and we started talking about The Lord of the Rings. All of a sudden, I was ready to treat it like any other great book. So I was in my first semester of grad school, spending hours on the phone every week, talking to my friend about Lord of the Rings, and I was in grad school for conservation biology and sustainable development. I think we moved through a few philosophers before he really got to Levinas, who is a French Jewish philosopher, and getting these calls to talk about Lord of the Rings for hours at a time, and I loved it. It was great. It was a challenge, and we worked kind of as a team, where he would bring like some concept, like Levinas has this concept of seeing the other by seeing their face. You have to really see the face, and what does that mean? So I would pull out all this face terminology, and for instance, Frodo's wounded by the Morgul knife on Weathertop when he confronts the Black Riders. There's a part where he's really being overcome and he's becoming a wraith as this knife works down towards his heart. And it says in there that he was having trouble seeing the faces of his friends. And what we came up with together was this idea of the wisdom of the heart.
Even though it's becoming a lot more accepted in society for the dad to stay home, I do feel a lot of pressure. When I come home, I feel guilty that I wasn't there all day, and I feel guilty that I have to ask Brendan, how do I get him to go down for his nap when it's the weekend and it's my turn to do that work? Or what did Callum eat today? What does he like to eat this week? I don't know. And so that makes me feel a little sad. But it's really nice knowing that Brendan's here and giving him lots of attention. And Brendan's a better fit than me. I would feel a lot of pressure to get a lot of chores done and probably wouldn't end up spending as much quality time with him anyway.
All right, somebody else get out there.
There, you are.
A lot of this surrounds Gandalf. He uses a lot of language in the books about what his heart tells him. And so there's the heart over here. That's Gandalf. That's the mighty person who pays attention to the hobbits. There's a great passage in the book when Gimli and Legolas are chasing after these orcs to rescue their friends Pippin and Merry, and they run into the riders of Rohan, and they start talking about hobbits, and one of these mighty warriors just starts laughing like it's a joke. And that's really what the wisdom of the heart is. It's the idea that you enter into community and you see the face of the ones that the mighty have deemed weak, whether that be the homeless or people with physical or mental disabilities. And the hobbits are that. Why would anyone who is mighty pay attention to these tiny little fat guys running around, giggling and just so tied up in their own comfort and unaware of the world around them? But Gandalf pays attention. There's this passage he talks about his heart telling him that the answer lies with these hobbits. So that's when they're going to send these people on the quest to take the ring to the Cracks of Doom to destroy it. And it's a quest that can be undertaken by the mighty or the weak with equal chances of success. And actually, maybe the weak have this outsider mentality, this understanding of the heart that helps them, as opposed to Sauron in his tower, where he weighs everything to a nicety, but it's all based on malice and greed and collecting power. And the wisdom of the heart is somewhere where you throw away that power and you undertake a task that seems insane. The wise would never think to undertake that task. We moved to Armco 2 years ago. The place we were in right before this was awful. Rat problems, and the landlady wasn't very responsive. The woman who lived next door was 102. I had seen her once through the door, but I had gotten to talk to one of her caregivers quite a bit. And at my job, I only ever worked 75%, so 30 hours. So I started doing some minor chores for the next door neighbor, like shoveling and bringing in the garbage and recycling cans. And this guy, the caregiver who I talked to, was like, "What are you doing that for?" You know, like I was trying to get something out of it, and I was just trying to help a neighbor. That really disappointed me that somebody,
so much suspicion.
Yeah, somebody thought it was creepy that I was being helpful. And this felt like a place where I wouldn't have to worry about that. And it's almost the opposite. We recognized a place that brought together a lot of things that were important to us: an environmental ethic, being able to work with people and not have them creeped out. I had heard about co-housing, I didn't know much about it. I got like the gist of it, being in an environmental program that you know a lot about community living. We had never thought we would be buying anytime soon, but we came and looked at the place and went around in the community. That was on a Sunday, and then Tuesday or Thursday we came to a community meal and met a bunch of people, and by the next Monday we were coming to ARPCO. The conception of this Shire, I think, in people's mind is this kind of idyllic land is undercut in the book by how silly hobbits are. I guess we're all pretty silly in the community. It's easy to get caught up in particular parts and lose sight of the whole. But I think when you take a step back and you see the community more broadly, it's a wonderful place to live. Worrying too much about any particular part of the community is a detriment to the whole. So I think the same thing with the Shire is that if you look at any one particular part of the Shire, it can be really silly, like how the hobbits eat 12 meals a day. But they're also really generous. And yeah, they're kind of provincial. They have no idea about the dangers of the wider world. When they're escaping the Shire and the Black Riders are coming in, all these hobbits stand up to the Black Rider and they help their friends. And I think that's what we have here in our co-housing. On issues, we can have resentments and difficulties, but we all love this community and we work really hard for it. So there's been a lot of concern about zombies. It came up in our proposals. Somebody had proposed spending money on zombie preparedness. So I grabbed what materials I had on hand and I made a kit for co-housing's response to zombies. It was right over there that I put up, in case of emergency, pulled this rope sign, and the panel would come away from the wall and you'd have your card, your consensus card, so you could make decisions about what to do in case of a zombie apocalypse, because really in the end you need to act, but before you act you need to decide, and we're big on deciding here. It started out small with a few eyes near the center, but they started to spread out, manifesting the desire of the community to be watchful and prepared for zombie attacks. And here we are, we're defended now. Still haven't seen a zombie. See a lot of rabbits, see a lot of birds, no zombies though. Sometimes I wake up in the night and worried, but then I just think about the eyes. And I feel there's a lot of people using their eyes and their hands and their brains to make this a safe place for me to live. Moving the books to the movies, the narrative is there, but I think Peter Jackson made seemingly small changes, which change the meaning of the story that you can pull out of it. Tolkien coined a term called the eucatastrophe, the good outcome that you could never plan for. So it changed it from this thing where Gollum shows up and bites off Frodo's finger and then falls into the lava. And in the book, it can't be planned for, but the reason it happens is the wisdom of the heart, is showing pity and mercy to Gollum, who got it over and over again. Gandalf keeps him alive when he catches him. Frodo stops Sam from killing him and uses him as a guide and tries to almost rehabilitate him. In the book, Sam shows him mercy on the side of Mount Doom right before they go into the cracks. And because of all these things, Gollum's there, he bites off Frodo's finger, and the ring is destroyed, and the goal is achieved, and the enemy is destroyed. But without that mercy, it wouldn't have succeeded. Frodo would have run away with the ring. But because of this mercy and the pity he showed, he won the day. They changed that to where Frodo actually pushes Gollum into the cracks and is thinking about dropping himself down into the cracks with Sam begging him, but at the end, and the ring ridiculously floating on the lava below him. And at the last moment, Frodo says, "No, I'm gonna live." He grabs Sam's hand. They start to pull him up, and at that moment, that's when the ring's destroyed. So it goes from this catastrophe to this outcome that you couldn't plan for, but is there because you showed pity and mercy to this weak other, to this act of will. Frodo by willing to live, destroys the ring. And I think that world loses its generosity, is the major thing I think it loses. And so I gave a talk a few months ago, and a lot of people from the community couldn't come to it, so I wanted to take an opportunity to show it to them. And I didn't want it just to be me, so I wanted to get other people in the community involved.
Oscar, get in there. Lynn, get in there.
Okay, I'll get in the bus for in a minute.
So why do I care about this? Fairy stories do something for us that some other stories don't. They meet some desires. And some of those are travel, but I think the important one, at least to the wisdom of the heart, is this idea of holding communion with other living things. So the first scene you're gonna see is on the side of Mount Doom.
We have to keep going, Mr. Frodo.
Our precious. They have it. They keep it from us. We must take our precious. Give it to us.
Run, Mr. Frodo! If you touch me again, you will burn. I'm gonna skewer you.
No, please. We'll be dust.
Then go. Go! Let us see you no more.
All right, so that's the book. Now let's see what Peter Jackson did to that scene.
We have to keep going, Mr. Frodo.
What clever hobbits to climb so high.
Run, Mr. Frodo!
It's pretty obvious all that the empathy and the mercy and the pity got sucked out, and all there's room for is sharp edges and blood. Gollum goes from being some wild-eyed, terrible, poor, tortured soul to being some punny 1950s comic book character. He's this enemy now instead of this other living being. When he was born and then we were staying up all night and Sarah was feeding him, I read The Hobbit to them some. Just recently I finished rereading The Lord of the Rings again while I get ready to work with my friend on another paper, and so I was reading it to him when he was going down for his naps.
I think Brendan's fascination with Lord of the Rings is great. I think everyone should have an interest in something, and it's a very healthy interest. So,
Callum.
oh, don't touch.
Wait, what's the best, funniest thing I can do? And you know what, you do it, and I don't like it at all. It's not funny, and it's not interesting. But if you get out there and you just do something wild that you never even planned in your entire life, you never thought you would do it,